Welcome at Studio Free Press Matters. At Studio Free Press Matters, we discuss everything concerning press freedom. It's not going very well with press freedom worldwide. So it's very important that we discuss every aspect of it. Today I have a very special guest with us in the studio, my colleague, Director of Policy and Program of Free Press Unlimited, Leon Willems. Leon,
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Leon, I wanted to discuss with you the trends concerning press freedom and safety. Can you share the picture, the biggest pictures, the three biggest trends of safety worldwide?
Of course, the number one trend is the impact of COVID on press freedom and the safety of journalists. Unfortunately, what we see is that there is an enormous impact. It is almost as if people are getting nervous about COVID, about all the stress related, and they take it out on journalism. They blame journalists for fake news, governments do. People on the streets hate journalists because they put their noses everywhere where people are getting together. And so there's a lot of threats to journalism at the moment. I think in all countries, also, for example, in the Netherlands, yesterday we had an incident where a photographer was making a picture of a burned out car at the side of the road. And people around started blaming the photographers and chased them away. And in the end, a shovel, a big bulldozer, ran into the car of the photographers and turned it upside down. And they didn't help until the fire department came. It's just crazy.
Unbelievable.
I mean, unbelievable, but these things happen everywhere in the world. So there's a lot of stress, a lot of anger. And somehow journalists are like an easy scapegoat. As the people that bring us the news, we hate them because there's so much bad news.
But you see this increase of violence against journalists, especially during COVID or since the pandemic.
This is really a trend. Of course, there's also a second big trend in safety, and that is online harassment, especially against women. All brakes are loose when it concerns women who speak out on Twitter. They get castigated by men. And so women journalists are facing a rough time psychologically. They get blamed for all sorts of things. They get cursed. They get called, in some cultures, people are called sluts or whores when they make, it's really nasty language. And unfortunately, we know from experience that if people start being hateful on the internet, in the end it leads to physical repercussions. So also you see a tendency to have more attacks, physical attacks in the open. So that is a second very big trend. And the third big trend, which is really the last year also, you see that governments are not so keen anymore on dissent. Of course, the function of the press is to criticize those in power and to hold them to account. But in the last year, we see a lot of countries, 18 countries, where there have been laws that are especially dedicated to convict journalists for fake news or libel, as they call it. And it's really governments don't want to be criticized anymore. And you see there.
What is then so new about this? Because there are, of course, a lot of governments that are repressive against the press. You mentioned this 18 countries. Are these democratic countries then?
Well, yes, this is the surprising thing. There's, of course, this trend of authoritarianism in the Philippines, in Russia, and Turkey, etc. We know it. It's very bad. But it has influence on many countries. So the Sputnik diplomacy, the vaccine diplomacy of Russia, for example, means that countries like Hungary and Serbia are also becoming more authoritarian-minded towards the press. So that's the impact. And you see that actually democratic countries inside the EU...
Just one thing, why is that related to each other? The Sputnik vaccination program and more repression to the press?
Because it's the leverage of having access to vaccines, having access to Russia, and the criticism on the undemocratic nature of Russia.
And that journalists actually cannot report on it freely, tell the whole story, etc., etc.?
So there are countries who are mild against Russia, even though it is doing absurd things like the hunger strike of Navalny, preventing him to see a doctor. It's beyond examples, even in the Russian history. I mean, we have to go back really to Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag to go back to what is Russia today. But yet you see very mild reactions, indecisive EU policies, no sanctions, no, let's say, multilateral response. How are we going to deal with this? And so countries get away with murder. This is the risk. It's a real threat. I think it's really important.
It's not only a threat then to journalism and free press, but also to democratic countries.
It's a threat to the function of democracy, and democracy can only live and survive if there's criticism, if people challenge the decisions that are made, question the rationale of it, and are allowed to come up with other solutions.
Right.
That is how democracies function, and that there's transitions, peaceful transitions from one government to another. Now there is a real gist for authoritarianism, more long-term stability, the same leaders. You see a real geriatric tendency in democracies, more older leaders, less replacement. So this is, if the press is not vivid and is not really critical, then we are eroding democracy itself also.
And COVID actually enlarged this.
It sharpened it, it polarized it even more, because there's so much discussion about health, there's so much discussion about the quality of the vaccines, so much gossip,
etc., etc.
Fake news, lies, conspiracy theories.
Right.
We need good journalism now.
Absolutely, it's vital actually. Is there a silver line?
There is a silver line, because I think that it's a very complicated silver line. I think when people understand how much is at stake, they have the ability to reverse. We saw what happened in the United States. Under extreme pressure, actually, they chose to have a more moderate president. It's not whether you are left or right, or it's being more moderate, more considerate, more understanding, more empathic. And so there is this ability of people who are electing governments to do the right thing when push comes to shove. Of course, we would like to see it not come that far. So
you mean here in the Netherlands or in Europe? Or?
Here in the Netherlands, I think there's an underestimation of the enormous threats that journalists are being exposed to. It's increasing every year. The government in the Netherlands is responding.
It's
the
always
European
reactive,
Union,
right?
It is, and it's mostly as a fire department. So we see incidents, and then we respond.
Right.
We need more guarantees. And this is why the European Union, I think, is also a silver lining. They're taking the Democracy Action Plan serious. So member states now have to report on the quality of their democracy. Press freedom, for the first time, is a real pillar in that. So every country in the European Union has to report on the state of media freedom.
On an annual basis.
That's a gain, on an annual basis, because this means that civil society can hold people to account.
Yeah, and they are monitored on this.
Yes, and that it's not happening without any consequence.
Oh, good. And what is Free Press Unlimited doing about that?
Well, we are, of course, on the front line trying to fight for all these things.
Absolutely.
I think we're doing a lot on emergency support, and we're very happy that we have re-engaged with the consortium of organizations to do more for safety of journalists in the European context. We're also working on investigations into murders of journalists, and we're talking to the Geneva Human Rights Commission about that. And for the first time, we see a real positive response. And we see also there that there is more interest in what civil society can do for this. So that is really good, I think.
Great to hear. So thank you very much for sharing this with us, Leon.
Welcome.
And thank you for watching us. Hope to see you next week again at Studio Free Press Matters.